Welcome back to the #1 television program in the history of the entire universe, everybody. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon, The Blackest Heart, and The Lonesome Crown, all three books published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Today I am going to be reviewing for you Sharpe's Tiger by Bernard Cornwell. This is book #1 in Bernard Cornwell's 22-book Sharpe's Rifle series. I've got the entire series here behind me, all 22 books. Now, as you can see, the books were half of the books were published by one publisher, so we got the weird orange spine here. And then the other half of the books were published by a different publisher, so we get these spines. Anyway, there's nothing you can do about that. It looks wonky as on your bookshelf, but I mean, you got to have the series. This is just one of the best, most well-researched, action-packed, super fly, dope, hot, historical fiction series ever written. And, you know, I've got every Bernard Cornwell book over there on my other shelf over here. We've got all of his Last Kingdom, if you ever watched that show, Last Kingdom. We've got his King Arthur books, his Civil War books, all of the books. And then, of course, his 22 Sharpe's Rifle books. Starting with Sharpe's Tiger, which I have in my hand right here. And we will be reviewing this. It came out in 1999. I think the first... So, there's 22 books in the series. This is book #1, but it wasn't the first one written. The first one written was Sharpe's Rifles, which I think was written in the late 1980s or mid-1980s. But anyway, he's written these. There is a chronological order to them, even though none of them were written in order, if that makes sense. So anyway, let's talk about the cover first and a few other aesthetics about the novel itself. So the cover is great. It is done by a artist named Paul Wright. I really like it. It's this Indian landscape from India with the rifles here and the Indian castle in the background. Sharpe's Tiger kind of like in the little box. I think that's fine. It's just kind of cool. But the most important thing about this book, there are maps. There are maps of the different landscapes that Sharpe and his character is going to... But what's cool is I've met Bernard Cornwell, and he has signed a good portion of my novels, so we've got that right there. Not only that, but this book, Sharpe's Tiger, was given to me in 1999 when it first came out. It was the very first ever Bernard Cornwell book I read, and it got me hooked on Bernard Cornwell, but it was given to me by a friend of mine who thought I might like it, and whenever I get a book from a friend, I have the friend that gave me the book sign it. So, you know, there's my friend Dave Wall. He signed the book. And so now I've always got a remembrance of where I got this particular book, who gave it to me, and the friend that introduced me to Bernard Cornwell, one of my favorite authors of all time now. I suggest you do that, folks. If people give you a book, just take the time to have them sign the book. The person that gifted you the book, have them write down, hey, I gave you this book, this is from me. You will always remember that person, and you will always remember the book fondly whenever you open it. It's just a cool thing to do. So, let's talk about the book itself. Set in India in 1799. Now, Richard Sharpe is the main character throughout all the Sharpe's Rifles books. He is a mercenary. Well, he's not really a mercenary. He is conscripted into 33rd Regiment Light Company of the King's Army. He's a British dude fighting in the British Army in India. And he's a young man in India. He has not seen a whole lot of war at this point. This is his first real adventure. Now, throughout the 22-book series, he goes on to have a shit ton of adventures in Spain and France and England and Russia, during Waterloo, the Battle of Trafalgar. He's the Napoleonic Wars. He's in everything, and it's cool. And if you don't want to read the books, you can watch the TV series, which has filmed all these books, starring Sean Bain. You know, he was Boromir. Anyway, so they're in India, 1799. I wanted to read the first page because one of the reasons I love Bernard Cornwell. His prose is so good. And this, my friend gave me this book, and as soon as I opened it up and started reading, I knew I had found one of my favorite authors because the prose is so elegantly written. Bernard Cornwell is one of the best writers in the world, and just listen to this. This is the opening. It was funny, Richard Sharp thought, that there were no vultures in England. None that he had seen anyway. Ugly things they were, rats with wings. He thought about vultures a lot, and he had a lot of time to think, because he was a soldier, a private, and so the army insisted on doing a lot of his thinking for him. The army decided when he woke up, when he slept, when he ate, when he marched, and when he was to sit about doing nothing. And that was what he did most of the time. Nothing. Hurry up and do nothing. That was the army's way of doing things. And he was fed up with it. He was bored and thinking of running. Him and Mary, running away. Desert. He was thinking about it now. And it was an odd thing to worry about right now, because the army was about to give Richard Sharp his first proper battle. So, and then we move on to a few more sentences. Then, before young Richard Sharp had known it, the battle had begun. Now, he had seen a couple of men killed. He remembered Sergeant Hawthorne's death best because the sergeant had been hit by a musket ball that drove a rib clean out of his red coat. There was hardly a drop of blood to be seen, just that white rib sticking out of the faded red cloth. You could hang a hat on that, Hawthorne had said in a tone of wonder. Then he sobbed, and after that he choked up blood, collapsed, and died. Beautiful writing. Absolutely wonderful. I mean, I wish I could write that well. It just makes me want to quit. I mean, I read the clunky-ass writing in my books, and I'm just like, then I read this, and I'm like, I should just quit. I should just fucking give up. This is beautiful. Anyway, so Richard Sharp is 22 years old. He's already been in the army for 5 years. He's only seen a few little skirmishes. Now he's going to be in a full-fledged battle. Now he's under the command of the brutal and incompetent Sergeant Hakeswill, who's just an idiot. Just an idiot. At the same time, he's in love with Mary. He wants to run away with Mary. And Mary is the widow of Sergeant Bickerstaff, who was killed earlier on in some campaign. But she's still kind of with this army. A lot of times in these armies, some of the chain of command got to bring their families with them. Well, anyway, Bickerstaff had his wife with him. Well, Bickerstaff is dead. Now Mary is sort of up for grabs with anybody else in this regiment. And she's kind of fallen in love with Sharp, and Sharp has kind of fallen in love with her. However, Sergeant Hakeswill, the incompetent, brutal sergeant, also wants Mary, but he wants her in a creepy, douchebaggy sort of way. And so we've got this love triangle, and we've got this jealousy thing. We've got Sharp hating a sergeant, and the sergeant hating Sharp. And Sharp is set up. He's set up for a crime that he did not commit, and he's sentenced to like 2,000 lashes. 2,000 lashes, folks. Most people didn't survive 50. But anyway, I won't tell you how that turns out. In the meantime, there's sort of these other plot lines going on. McCandless is a Scotsman, and he's got this mysterious letter from Napoleon Bonaparte, which I won't get into. And Aparoa is an officer in the Tipu's army, and the Tipu's army is, they're the Indian, they're the the English regiment has gone into India to and their job, they've got a couple of jobs, and I'll get into that, but the Tipu's army is kind of standing in the way. Now, Sharp is set up for this crime, and he gets sent away. The objective of Sharp's regiment is to push the ruthless Tipu of Mysore from his tiger throne. And that's why we get Sharp's tiger. We've got this tiger throne, the ruthless Tipu in his army. So they are also tasked with making contact with the Scotsman McCandless, who's being held captive by the Tipu, and he's the one with the mysterious letter from Napoleon. So they've got a few objectives, this army. Meanwhile, Sharp has been sort of set up to as a fall guy for a lot of different things, and he is forced to pose as a deserter from his army, even though he wanted to desert. Now he's forced to propose as a deserter and go into this enemy territory as a deserter as part of a scheme to do a lot of different things, which I won't. There's a lot of schemes running through this. But the city of Mysore is openly besieged by Sharpe's regiment, and Sharpe still has to maintain this ruse that he's a deserter for all the plans to work, if this makes sense. And he has to go with the plan to the point where he's actually fighting against his own men. And there's the tiger throne and all of that. That's kind of the basic plot, and I did not give any spoilers away. I just basically told you kind of what was on the back here. Just an absolutely fantastic book. Probably my favorite of the Sharpe books, to be honest with you, is this first book. Even though it was not the first Sharpe book written, it's the first in chronological order, from Sharpe as a young soldier all the way to when he retires. But probably my next favorite would be Sharpe's Rifles, which is book 4. However, Sharpe's Rifles was the first one written. However, it is book 4 chronologically. This was probably about the 12th one written, but it's book 1 chronologically, if that makes sense. And it is an absolute 100% 10 out of 10 action-adventure historical novel with just absolutely wonderful writing, wonderful set pieces, wonderful action, wonderful battles, wonderful plot, wonderful intrigue, wonderful betrayals, love stories, everything you'd want in an action-adventure novel about an English regiment sent to India to do, English regiment type things. With a lot of backstabbing, betrayal, and evil characters thrown in. And pretty girls. And rifles and swords. Tigers. Sharpe's tiger. Anyway, 10 out of 10.